What's up, y'all? I'm going to give you an update on where we're at in Education 751, talk about how to handle things, and look at the overall schedule and see where we're at, see where we're going, and then talk about this week's assignments. So here we go. Let me share my screen. Let's just share the desktop. See everything. Okay, so this file here is the course schedule, and just use this to talk through what we've done so far. We introduced the course, and you've taken a lot of quizzes, and some of those grades are there and some of them are not. And I'm working on them, and they are working on that, but just finish all the quizzes. We will work the grades out. I will communicate with you on if I need anything, but more than likely you're going to end up with full points on that because you will have done them all, and I will eventually have evidence of that. So understand that you're concerned, but I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to get through all the quizzes, take the final, and focus on the assignments. And I will make sure that your grade aligns properly. So let's focus on learning because this is about our dissertation, not about this class. Okay, so yes, we've had some computer glitches. We started off on wikis and they went haywire, but we did introduce ourselves. We started talking about the topic. You looked at some possible research questions, and then we started talking about what to do with that. What's going to be your sample population, etc. What are the descriptive statistics that you'll need to know about that? Then we started playing with inferential statistics, and this last week got very, very practical in looking at what are some of the possible questions that make sense from a research standpoint. What is the correlation question? What is the relationship between X and Y? And what would a t-test question look like where you're comparing pre-post for one group or comparing two separate groups and looking at their gains? So the purpose of that, and by the way, we didn't look at chi-square. I just listed those other two as possibilities that you can investigate later. We are focusing on the most common ones because we can't learn everything in a short amount of time. So here's what we're focusing on. We are looking at the decisions that you have to make and that you need to be ready to make. And if you go the quantitative route, these are the most common looks, and I wanted you to see all of the major kinds of questions that you might write for your topic so that you can decide which ones make the most sense for you, for what you want to know, and for what you need in your situation. So that's why I'm having you go through and write those questions. And then so we did correlations in two forms of t-tests in DP5, and then we looked at more complex things in DP6, assignment 6, where you looked at more variables and decided how you might include those. And and what tests that would bring. And you guys are doing a great job, and thank the good Lord, thank you, Lord. The platform seems to be stable, and all of those things I've been able to give a response to, give you a grade, and the grade is still there. And most of you have done beautifully, and a few of you have needed a little tweak, and I will respond to any new ones as quickly as possible. So that's going well. The class in general is going well. Do you know everything about statistics? No. Are you going to? No. I'm going to make sure at the end of this course, you know the things that you need to do well on your dissertation. You will be able to choose from the kinds of questions that make sense and that are useful and trustworthy. You already have that list of questions that you might pick for quantitative. If you've got a more complicated question, we would look at that together in a one-on-one discussion. But right now, those are pretty much most of the choices that you might make for quantitative. Now, the question this week is going to be, what does that do for me? In DP7 or Assignment 7, you're going to be focusing on looking at the question from the, okay, what does that answer? What are the possibilities? And what does the outcome look like? And so we're going to look at that in just a second. At the end, in a few days, I will post the quantitative worksheet and its own video on how to fill that out. And that will be the end of the strictly quantitative section of the course. Other thing that's going to be happening this week is you are going to schedule time with me. There's going to be one post that asks for your input on when we should meet for a class time. It's not required, but it's a chance to have some live sessions with Dr. Taylor, answer questions, and explain one more time where we're at, why we're there, and how this is going to turn into your dissertation. And then I'll also send out a schedule for you to sign up for one-on-one discussions. We can do that through this Zoom app that I'm using to record, or we can do that just by phone. The Zoom app is probably more useful because you can show me your screen and I can look at questions with you. But we can work those details out. For right now, let's go look at what's going to be on discussion post 7. And it looks a lot like this. Discussion post 7. You're going to list your questions from 5 and 6. You're going to list possible outcomes using the language of the question. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. My question is about a relationship, in other words, the correlation between collegiality and EDUC scores. There are two possibilities. The numbers that we crunch may show a statistically significant relationship, or there will not be a statistically significant relationship. And those are your two possible outcomes of that research. Now, you usually do that using a Pearson R test or a Spearman-Rowe, when there will be an associated p-value, p being probability, And in order to reject the null, in other words, say that there is a statistically significant relationship, you're going to use a two-tailed test in almost every circumstance, where the p-value has to be less than 0.05. So you'll get numbers. You'll put your data in columns in a computer program. It could be Excel, SPSS, or any number of things, and that's up to you. But you put your data in columns. In this case, it would be a column of collegiality scores and a column of end of course scores that correspond for the same teacher on the row. And then you would use whatever technique is in that computer program to run a Pearson R, and it would produce the R, which is the slope of the line that's best fit for the data, or it would go, or it would, it's going to give you a number, but it may be quite small. And it's going to produce a p-value, and that p-value tells you the probability that this was actually what was going on. It didn't happen. Did it happen by chance? And if it's less than 0.05, that means we are more than 95% sure that this was not by chance, that there really is a relationship. So we want that tiny, tiny p-value, because the chance that represents the probability that it was by chance, that we just had a weird set. And if it's very small, that's very good. If it's larger than 0.05, then that means there's a fairly big chance that this isn't real, that it was just a random input. So that's how we know what to say after we look at those numbers. We can reject. So we're going to practice. You're going to look at your two possibilities, and you're going to write them up very similarly to this. There is a statistically significant relationship, or there is not a statistically significant relationship. And you're going to list your variables, which is why it says possible outcomes specific to your research question. Now, I included this little table because if it's statistically significant, that's good. It means there is a relationship, but how strong is the relationship is determined by the R, and this is a chart that just tells you if your R was 0.5, then it's moderate. It's pretty good, not the strongest, not terribly weak. If it's over 0.8, then it's a very strong relationship. And that's part of what you do what you say to when you write that out. Okay, as there is a significant difference between the EDUC scores and of the math teachers before or the scores after implementing the PLC. And one possibility is that there is a significant difference. The other possibility is that there is not a significant difference. Okay, so this was my example that would correspond with a t-test. And a t-test is going to give you a t-value and a p-value. Now, the t-value is complicated to interpret. So you report it, but the truth of the matter is we really only look at the p-value to make a decision. And again, it has to be less than 0.05 in a two-tailed test. for us to reject null hypothesis. So this is the outcome we were expecting. We think there's going to be a significant difference. And so we want to reject the null. If we have to accept the null hypothesis is there is not a significant difference, which null meaning not. So we don't want to do that. We want there to, we believe there's a significant difference. That's what we're really trying to prove, hopefully. But the numbers will tell us, and if that probability value, that p-value on a two-tailed test is 0.05 or bigger, then we have to reject it and say there really wasn't a difference from before the PLC and after the PLC, which would be a real bummer, and we'd have to look at our PLC and figure out what was wrong. Is there a significant difference between, okay, so this is my next question, and this one is another t-test. This is between two groups, one that used that had a PLC and one that did not. And for rejecting the null means there is a significant difference between the two groups, the scores of the two groups, and it's going to have a t-value and another p-value, and we look at the p, and shock of all shocks, in a two-tailed test it needs to be less than 0.05, and if it is, we get to reject the null, which means there is a significant difference, and if it's 0.05 or bigger, then there's a big chance that this is just random, and therefore we can't say that it's really statistically significant, which would be a bummer. But it does happen, and you have to just report the truth even when you don't particularly like it. Because rejecting the null would mean that the PLC is not making a difference, and that would totally be a bummer. Okay. Where's my question, Joe? Okay. Well, this must be a version. All right. Well, there's similar things going to happen with my next question, which was the ANOVA question. And I will have the full one up here. But when it comes down to the end, it's the same kind of thing. It'll have an F instead of a T, but it'll have a P, and it's still about the probability. And if the probability that it's random is less than 0.05, then we get to say it's true, and there is a significant difference. Sorry about that. I must have the wrong file open. Anyway, so you're going to have your questions over here. You're going to have your two possibilities, and you're going to have your significant statistics. So when you do a t-test, it's going to have the t-value and the p-value. You look at the p-value to make a decision. That is what I want in this column. Is what are the key statistics? It'll produce a bunch of numbers, but you only really care about these key statistics. T and P, or R and P, or F and P. That's always the little p for probability, which is the probability that what you're studying happened by chance, and you don't usually want that. I mean, you want that to be really, really small. So that probability really small is reject the null every time. So you will just need to practice doing this format if you have other more complex questions, you'll have to look up what was the test and what does that test do and what are the key statistics. And it's slightly different for each one. And when it comes down to the more complex ones that we did in assignment 6, you'll have to be very careful about the wording. But all of this will do two things for you. This assignment will make you look at your list of questions, and you're going to choose from them on the next thing. So it will put all of them in the same spot. It will tell you what they can tell you. You'll look at the two possibilities and you will say either this or that. And that will, that way you'll know, here's what this test can do for me, and you can decide whether that's the question you want to ask from a quantitative perspective. And you can choose from among those for the next assignment, from the things that you might actually want to do for your dissertation. Okay, so that is assignment 7. And you will post all of that so that we can see it. And it will lead into the next assignment, as I said. So please, 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 now that things are settling down, the course seems to be stable in terms of the discussions are there, and I'm able to respond to everybody's stuff. Please adhere to this week's deadlines. They'll be a little more strict because there's no tech issues going on. The quizzes, don't worry about the timeline, just get them done, and I will figure out how to give you credit for your work. But for discussion posts and assignments, ongoing assignments like that, please do them according to the class schedule. And the class schedule for this week, you still have a little time to work on assignment 6. And then DP7 will be due on June 9th. And the last assignment of the week, the quantitative worksheet, is going to be due on June 12th. Again, I will post a separate video for that because this is really important, because eventually you're going to turn in this quantitative worksheet, possibly. You're going to choose between quantitative and qualitative at the end of the course, and if you choose quantitative, this is what you're going to give to your chair and say, this is my dissertation. So we want to do a fantastic job this week setting up for deciding which questions to ask, and then filling out the worksheet as complete as possible so that you'll have a running start for your dissertation if indeed it is quantitative. And next week we'll work on qualitative. We've done 3 weeks dedicated to quantitative, and then we're going to do 3 weeks dedicated to qualitative, and then finally you're going to decide between the two and put up a presentation that will convince your chair that this is a good idea, and I will walk you through the steps for that, just like I'll walk you through the steps for the quantitative worksheet. All right, there is a direction for the course. you are doing really well. Those last two posts were pretty darn good, and I like the way it's going. Some of you saw that some questions were a better fit for you in your context than others, and that's great. That's what we want to learn from this. So keep up the good work, and I will see you online.